Please give a warm Georgia Tech welcome to our guest, Bruce Byington.
This is when I'm supposed to turn this on. Can you hear me now? Yep. Okay. There we go. So thank you. Thank you for inviting me and asking me to come today. It's just 2 minutes on me, just so you get to know me a little bit. 1969, I came down from Ohio to Georgia Tech. Was one of the people up there, and everybody said, well, "Why are you going down all the way down there?" And I have to say it was because of the co-op program and the opportunity that Tech was allowing me to have at the time, and I haven't looked back since, and I hope you never do either. It's an incredible gift to be able to say you're a graduate of Georgia Tech. And after that, I graduated in ME. I was, like I said, I was in the 5-year co-op plan, except mine was 6+ years. It was a little bit different than what's actually in this brochure. But after graduating, I spent really 3 chunks of my career. The first chunk was hardcore engineering. Did 7, 8 years of got my professional engineering license and was working in the petrochemical industry, the power industry, designing cogeneration plants and power plants. Got my MBA, went to my second career, and that was in business. And that's where we ended up doing a lot of merger acquisition work, a lot of strategy and planning work for different business units in companies like Cooper Industries and British Petroleum. And after that, I had this little thing called a heart attack at age 40, and I don't recommend it. It's not something that is very nice to go through, but it sure is a great learning experience because it makes you wake up and think about what's really valuable in your life in a way that probably a lot of people don't get to have. And so it was one of my lessons of experience. And so I'm going to talk about that. I'm going to talk about our lessons of experience research at the center, give you a little bit of update around what that looks like, and then talk about my own lessons of experience. The career, took that turn, and when we decided to go to Colorado, and Colorado had a lot to do with the decision. I had 3 young boys at the time, and just being able to raise them in that environment was one of my key things that I decided to do. And so, and I've been with the center for 22 years since. Helped develop the Colorado campus and in all kinds of different positions. And like you heard, right now I have the Americas. So that's Latin America and Canada and the 3 campuses here under it. So what are we going to try to do here? We're going to, the goals for the next hour is going to be something like, giving you a little bit of update on CCL and who CCL is, because I think it's important to understand what this little organization is all about. We're going to share with you our research that's been very fundamentally changed the way learning and development, or actually developed in corporations since the 80s. And then I'm going to talk about my own lessons. The ultimate goal here is I'm going to give you a lot of snippets of things that you need to be thinking about. And I wish that I was thinking about earlier in my career. And those snippets around leadership are things that I believe that if in fact you focus on it earlier and faster, you will actually help your own career develop in a much more efficient and effective way. So my hope for you is that you come out of this session saying, I want to learn more. I'm going to bring some awareness to a few of these things to you. But what I really want you to do is really think about how do I go back and learn deeper and go delve deeper into some of these things because they're really important. And they're really important to learn early. One of the things that I've heard time and time again over the last 20 years at CCL from executives is that I wish I had done some of this earlier in my career. I wish I had some of this understanding earlier in my career because it would have been of great help, and maybe I wouldn't have done some of the foolish things I did along the way in my own journey around leadership. So who's the center? the center is this organization that has this big, hairy, audacious mission. And if you read this mission behind me, I think what we feel like at the center, that in our own small way, we're accomplishing this mission in spades. The center was actually started by a man by the name of Smith Richardson. He's the son of the founder of the Vicks Corporation, and this is Vicks Vapor Rub. 1890 they started, and in 1985 they sold out to Procter & Gamble. But Smith was the driver of what this whole thing, the Vicks Corporation growing, because he was a marketing guy, and he went to his dad and said, hey, I think we ought to do some things differently, and et cetera. And he was one of the key reasons why the Vicks Corporation grew the way it did over the years. He also was very, very he had a lot of foresight. He was really thinking about things that you didn't see at the time. So in the 50s and 60s, there wasn't a whole bunch of change that was going on in the world, and it was a pretty stable economic environment. And so what you saw with him, though, is that, hey, enterprises fail because people don't adapt. And he was out there very early on asking a lot of questions about, well, what does it take to actually create management and leadership that adapts? And this was a world that, because it didn't have much change, the Army uses a term right now called VUCA. Okay, how many have heard the VUCA term? It's basically, I thought you would. The VUCA is, volatile. It's the uncertainty. It's complex. It's ambiguity, and we certainly are living in a VUCA world now. And because of that, this saying in this quote here is even more important today than it was way back then. He had a number of questions that he wanted to ask, and most importantly was this one down below. Because at this time, in the history of management and leadership, there was this notion out there that leaders are born and not made. Well, that's just not a true statement. And if you really pay attention, we can understand how can we develop those leaders that handles these challenges. And that was his big question. And it was these questions really that started the center. So in 1970, we started. His grandson told me the other day, he says, Bruce, my grandfather never would have thought that, what the center has evolved into. And what has the center evolved into? Well, our headquarters is in Greensboro. We have an office in Colorado Springs and San Diego. And then we have an office in Singapore and Brussels, but we also, and those are our big offices, 50 to 350 people in those offices. And then we have small offices in Moscow, in Joburg, in Ethiopia, in India, in Shanghai. Just recently we opened up an office. And so we're around the world now, and we're doing work with global corporations around the world. And I'm going to talk a little bit about what that work looks like. So just some more interesting facts. Bottom line is that there's a little bit in the introduction. We're working right now in 135 countries. We have 20,000 leaders annually that we're working with. We got, let me get that up there, 500,000 alums and about 2,000 organizations annually that we're working with. So even though we're in 27,000 assessments, who have taken a 360 in here? Anybody who's taken a 360? Okay, I'm going to talk about more of the 360 instrument. We developed that in the 80s. That was the very first 360. So and the people that we work with is all kinds. I mean, this is even a small list of the types of companies that we work with. I was just meeting this morning with Coca-Cola and talking about some of the things that we're doing for them on a worldwide basis. So what is it that makes us different? We said we're a nonprofit organization. We're a nonprofit that really focuses on research. And this is where we're, and just on leadership. Leadership only. On the slide earlier, we've been rated in the top 10 by the Financial Times for 12 consecutive years. We're the only organization that can say that. And because of our focus on leadership and leadership only, we produce a lot of research over time. The other piece that is really important here is that very top line, that evaluation piece, because we really believe in measuring our work around impact. So what is the impact that we're really having? Are we really changing the behaviors of some individuals? Are we improving them as leaders? And so we have a very small group, but a very, very important group for us at the center that does a lot of evaluation studies, impact studies, helping to understand whether the money that the organizations that are spending with us are actually having the impact that they want inside their organizations and with their leadership. Is their leadership culture really changing? This is a pretty big statement, and we believe that we have done this, and I'm going to show you here just 3 or 4 key things, maybe five pieces of research, real briefly, that says, okay, we were the first ones out there with some of this research, and the really cool thing about this research is that it seems timeless. What we've done is we've continued the research over and over again to make sure it's really not not changing. So, what kind of things are we looking about? Well, first of all, we really feel that we started in 1970. The first 10 years was a kind of a think tank group, and we started developing some of the ideas around the assessment work and how we're going to actually use assessment for development. Now, this is really important because we don't believe in assessment for selection as much. We think assessment is there for development, and we need to measure it so that people can really understand who they are, and it's to be able to set the foundation of saying, okay, how am I going to change, and what do I need to change to become a more effective leader? Yeah, we pioneered the 360, like I said a minute ago. We were the first ones to do that. This gentleman down here, here at the bottom here, is David Campbell. Anybody ever taken the Strong Campbell? This is an assessment that helps you understand where your passions are. He came out of University of Minnesota. He developed that while he was at the University of Minnesota before coming to us. But under David's tutelage, we were able to start to do things like build the 360 instruments, and the 360 instruments allowed us to do all the research that we did. So when we hire a behavioral scientist at CCL, one of the first things is they start to drool. Because we have such great databases and all this information that you can get, sink your teeth into, and it's really a very vibrant, very vibrant database technology environment around being able to have access to leaders from all over the world, and so we think our research is really important in that. So what are some of those pieces of research? This is late 80s research that has been duplicated time and again. And it's called our Lessons of Experience. What we did is we asked one question. And that question was this. If in fact, you look at your career, look at where you've been over time, we asked for 3 events, okay? What are 3 key events that says what happened? And what did you learn, for better or worse, in that situation? So how many people here, I'm really looking for the students, how many students here are actually involved with some leadership type activities that you're going on right now? Just raise your hand. So quite a few. How much time do you spend reflecting on what you're learning in those leadership positions? And this is the time when I need you to speak, okay? Okay. So how much time do you reflect on your lessons of experience? Yes?
A lot more now than I used to.
Yeah?
So as I've gone from being someone who was at the forefront of a leadership position and kind of transitioning out of that and watching younger people come into this position, now a lot more.
Yeah.
But not all at the time.
Not while you were doing it, but now you're having time to reflect, you're doing it. Yeah, good. Any other people? I'm going to come back to that in just a second. Any other? Yes, please.
There are 2 times I will have a lot of time reflecting what I did versus I made a mistake.
Yes.
I'll go back and see why it went wrong. Second time is, I guess, prepare for interview.
Yeah, prepare for interview.
They
Yeah.
always ask when you have a challenge and how you overcome them.
Right. Right. That's good. That's good. And the mistakes are huge. They're huge opportunities for learning. And there's no doubt that if, in fact, what we found in this research is that most of the leaders were not taking the time to reflect so that they can actually help them into the future, okay? And one of the things that I would say about myself is, and I was sharing this with the SAA group that I was meeting with prior to coming down here, is that I was in a few leadership positions at Tech. I was president of my fraternity, and I was also treasurer of the Student Government Association. And I have to say, those lessons of experience that I had in those positions were some of the start of what I wish I had continued more of very quickly, because it was the mistakes. It was the mistakes of when I was leading a group of 100 guys and I didn't handle situations very correctly, and I just would go right over that. And I did not sit back and reflect on why, or try to question myself around it. So the lessons of experience research came out, and what it did was it helped us really talk about, these things are where the actual lessons actually started to take place. And you'll see up there is challenging assignments and hardships. We kind of group those things together as those types of experiences that you're having that you should be able to take a lot of learnings away from. And so the other question there around challenging assignments is, what is your corporation doing for you to help put you into those challenging assignments? Okay? And so it's something that I'm going to talk about here in a second. This is something that you can control. Other people are mentors and bosses in particular, but mentors, it's coaches. It's it's the kind of things that could be your mother and father, could be a professor, but other people had a lot of impact on people as they learned their own lessons of experience around leadership. Informal training and development programs on the small side. And what we've done over time is continue this research. And so the research that we just did recently was at the very top. This is 100 CEOs, CFOs, executive vice president level people. And again, what we found is the same stuff. The people are learning from the same types of things, and we've developed this model that's now become very much a kind of a ground, a fundamental foundation to so many leadership architectures out there for corporations. 70% of, and I'm including hardships in here, 70% of the learning comes from challenge assignments / hardships. So, 20% are coming from developmental relationships. That's that mentoring, the other people piece. And then 10% is actually the coursework and training. Okay, so that's where the actual impact is happening on individuals as they learn about leadership. And so, how can you, as a corporation, or your own organization, if once you get your own organization, because I know many of you will, is that how do you develop your own leadership architecture to build the leadership pipeline that you need for your organization? Well, we would suggest that you need to pay attention to this. So, I'll give you a couple examples. I've been working with Experian and I'm allowed to use their name. So sometimes I'm going to say, company X, and sometimes I'll be able to use the name. But Experian, we all know them as the credit people, but they're a huge financial organization. We were developing the architecture for their mid-level and senior level people in the organization. How do we do that? Well, so we start to think about what kind of levels, assignments, what's going into that architecture about experiential experiences, okay? And we do a lot of what we call action learning development with them. And these action learning development are real projects that teams are working on that coming out of a coursework and training, this 10% piece, and these teams now are working on this, and they have to present to the executive board. After, let's say, 3-6 months of work on a particular challenging activity that's sponsored by the business units. So Experian's got 40-some business units. The business unit heads are the ones that actually sponsor these things. And so what we find is that if you actually combine the challenging assignments with that coursework and training, then you have a much more powerful experience as far as driving home the objectives of what that experience is all about. The other piece is developmental relationships. That could be a coach. We do a lot of executive coaching. We do a lot of development of mentors in programs. Because again, what we find, and you can see this towards the end of my talk here, is that the support as you go back into your organization, the support that you actually need to help you try to work on the behavioral changes that you're looking for is absolutely necessary for impact. Absolutely necessary for things that can change. So this 70-20-10 has become what I would call just one of the industry standards now, thinking about it. Procter & Gamble, the head of the CLO, the Chief Learning Officer, I saw Mohit give a speech for the conference board just 6 months ago, and it was how they took 70-20-10 and actually drove it into Procter & Gamble, and how they thought about their challenging assignments. What assignment is necessary now for the development of Andy? For the development of Danny, et cetera. So what kinds of things do you need to be doing? And this is something you all can have control over. There are things that you can be doing in your career. Don't sit back and think that this is something that that you don't have some control over. And I think that I was walking in the mountains with a gentleman by the name of Bob McDonald. And Bob worked for McDonnell Douglas. Now, he wasn't part of the McDonald's, okay, but he was on the executive team. And he knew me pretty well, and he basically said to me at one point, he said, Bruce, you didn't pay attention to your career, did you? You just let it happen. And I thought, interesting. He's right. Bob's right. I did just let it happen. It just kind of, one thing led to another. Headhunter comes, you kind of go off on a track, and I didn't really think about things as I went along. And so, Bob knew me well enough to understand that, with my own preferences of how I work, is that that's something that I probably could have done better, and I think I could have in one way. Now, I've been lucky in the other way. And the other way is I paid attention to the heart attack. I paid attention to the things that I needed to do at the time, and following my own passions, which fly fishing is one of them. So that's another thing that took me to Colorado. But the thing is that you need to not have lucky's good. But you need to be controlling this. You can be going to your bosses and saying, okay, what kind of challenge do I need next? Okay, where can I get this next piece of learning from? And corporations today are more and more, I think that there's a maturity level that's going on in at least the Fortune 500 companies that is, quite remarkable in some ways. 10 years ago, 15 years ago, most of the organizations that we were working with, I would call them immature learning and development organizations. Okay, they did not have strong L&D thought processes. They didn't even think about their leadership pipeline in the way that they should be thinking about it. They didn't really understand the architecture needed to develop to develop the people for the gaps they had in their leadership pipeline. And you go in today, and boy, the whole maturity level of the conversation is at a different level now. Now, we love to find those organizations that are immature still, because then we can bring all of our stuff to the table and help them develop that, and we're doing that as well. So, 70-20-10, pay attention to it. You've got control over it. You've got some things that you can do with it. I was also lucky enough at one point in my career to have a boss, the executive vice president for the energy sector in Cooper Industries. We built equipment for the energy business, and he told me one time, says, Bruce, don't look back, don't have any regrets. All things that you're doing, you're going to be learning from, and that's all good. Okay. Now he told me that, as I was leaving the organization, I got recruited really by a headhunting outfit, and I've looked back sometimes and thought, he's right. definitely do that. And, sometimes when you let yourself slip, I thought, I wonder what would have happened if I stayed at Cooper. So, it's one of those things that you have to fight all the time. So, but 70-20-10 is very important for your own career, and think about it like that. Out of the lessons of experience came also this research around derailment. Everybody's heard the term derailment? Nobody has? Okay, so derailment. Why do people derail? Why do people keep, go up the scale and get to the director level, vice president level, senior vice president level, and then all of a sudden derail? So out of this lessons of experience stuff, we started, a little side tact after we getting certain information about people having hardships, and we found that these are the kind of factors that were causing derailment. Now, this was the 1996 research. We did it back in the 80s. We've done it in the 2000s. These numbers have changed slightly, but they're the same factors. So, okay. So take a look at those factors. And what strikes you about them? Does anything really jump out at you? Okay, tech students, you guys, this is where analysis comes in. Yes?
The third one, the inability to build and lead a team, I think that's something, as a senior executive, that should be second nature. So
Yeah.
that's a little surprising.
Yep, good, excellent, yes? Too ambitious. Well, and why do you think that's even up there?
It's interesting, I guess. People tend to want to move up a lot, and they want greater than their
Yeah. They're not willing to sit there and say, okay, I need a few more lessons of experience, and they get ahead of themselves. So that's definitely something we definitely see. I'll talk about that a little bit more later. Good. What other kinds of things? Look it up there. Yes, please.
Yeah, a lot of them just go back to inability to work well with others.
Good. That's what I was looking for. Thank you. Those are other good points you made, but that's the thing. Just think about how many of these up there are like that. Okay? They're interpersonal stuff. They're not the inability to work with each other. You can really, if you look at it, you've got quite a few. And there's this whole thing about emotional intelligence. And it's really, poor performance is poor performance. Too narrow functional orientation is a lot about you too, about, are you willing to step out of the function that you're in and learn some other things? You're not prepared for promotion. That's just, you're too ambitious. You're trying to get, but the other things up there, all around emotions, emotional intelligence. It's about your EQ, and it's about your ability to actually interact with other people and get things done. And right now, I'm dealing with, the ability to develop or adapt with one individual, this whole area of, inability to build and lead a team with another individual. These are the kinds of things that, you need to be paying attention to. And when you do 360s, you get the feedback. You get the feedback on whether you're doing this well or not. And it's something you need to be paying attention to, and for sure, as you go through. So how do organizations hinder and derail? They do things like this. So there was a time, Procter & Gamble, talked about this. Procter & Gamble, for instance, was moving people every 2 years. How much lessons of experience can you have moving people every 2 years? Okay? You can't, by the time you get started, et cetera, they now are doing it every 4 to 5 years, at a minimum. Okay, so they want the people to be in the job for a little while. This, the vertical stovepipe, especially in today's world. I'm going to talk about global matrices in a minute, and you cannot just develop in your own little vertical stovepipe. Avoiding the risk of challenging assignments. Again, I've heard CLO people talk about how individuals get protected in an organization. They don't want this individual to actually go to this challenging assignment because they might derail. But that actually could derail them, not having those challenging assignments so they can have their lessons of experience. So, and then of course the overreacting to screw up some mistakes. If in fact you're in an environment that I was working with one top team in an organization where the CEO is a privately held firm, pretty good size, consumer product company, and the CEO said, why aren't we innovating like we used to? And as we get in there, we start doing a lot of team stuff. We start working with the innovation. We talk about a lot of creativity stuff. But at the end of the day, it was because the CEO himself, who was the grandson of the founder, different company, not the same company, but the grandson of the founder was really killing people because of mistakes. He was just stomping on them when they did make a mistake. And the easiest way to kill innovation in an organization and develop a non-innovative culture is doing that. But again, there's some things here that you can pay attention to in your own career. Don't let them develop move you too fast, and make sure that you are not staying in one area way too long. So. Here's a research nugget. So I'm just going to throw this up there because it goes back to derailment. So in that top L8 leadership at the peak is our program that's only is focused on 12 people at a time. It's application only. It's at the C-suite level, so it's executive vice presidents, CFOs, CEOs, et cetera. And we continually do research with that environment because we do about 20 to 25 programs a year with leadership at the peak type people. Okay, and that gives us again a great forum. I think one of the things that I would say is about my career that I've been lucky in the ability to observe individuals in kind of a microcosm type of laboratory. Around their own leadership qualities and their own leadership faults, and be able to see how they work in that environment. And so, in leadership at the peak is one of those places where it's just been a wonderful opportunity to do all that. And in our developing the strategic leader program, we also do a lot of work on just the strategy and the strategic side of leadership pieces, and seeing this. That collaboration and the focus on the team rather than the individual leader is just huge, and especially in the global matrices that are now being developed to execute the business strategies of these different organizations. So at the end of the day, you think about collaboration, you think about those derailment factors. It's all linked. If in fact you have some inability to actually have those kind of interpersonal relationships to build collaborative networks, then you're going to be one of these less than half the executive survey believe leaders in the organization are highly skilled. All right? So, here's another thing that came out of lessons of experience. Women's leadership issues. So why do you think this matters? Why does women leadership issues matter? And now men, be careful. Okay, you can get yourself in a lot of trouble here if you. But why do you think it matters? Anybody? Yes. You do. You bring a different perspective. The research shows it. I'll show that in a second. What else? Why does it matter? Yes.
Women are making up a larger percentage of the workforce.
Well, you guys are good. Absolutely. We'll talk about that in a second. Yes.
Half of all consumers are women.
Yes. Half of all consumers are women. Yep. So you've just answered all the questions. The gender mix in the workplace is shifting. Women now comprise over 50%. We got women drive the world economy. Okay. So the consumer piece. You've got 91% of home purchases account for $20 trillion of purchasing decisions. Then you look at this, and this is where the research gets really interesting. If in fact you have women on your team, you have better performance. Okay. Why is that? Why do you think that is? When you said yes.
So if you're thinking about it in terms of so you want diversity in your leadership team, right? Because then you are more likely to be able to come up with alternative perspectives that lead to new ideas and innovation.
Yes.
So because women think differently, they're able to think about problems and management processes differently.
Good.
Which can lead to and drive business results.
Yeah, that's excellent. Yep. And that's probably number one. And what's number two? Just think about the slide I just put up previously. What do we talk about? Okay, you're on Monday, note this, okay, for you all taking the impacts. Collaboration. Women collaborate. They collaborate better, okay? Not all, not always, this is not a definitive, but in general, there's stronger collaborative networks formed, with women. So if in fact you need collaboration to execute your business strategy, then this is one of the reasons why there's better performance. So what are the themes that came across? So, lesson could be in the economy, not because of any lack of part of it, but because of lack of development pathways. And that's McKinsey just, recently. Who's heard of the term breaking the glass ceiling? Okay. That's our book. That was our research. That came out of lessons of experience. Okay. Now, we would say right now that that research continued, and Standing at the Crossroads was our latest book. I think it was 2006 or 7 or something like that. And in that research, we came up with these kind of key developmental themes that women need to be focusing on as they develop as leaders. And one of the key things that we would say is, I think breaking the glass ceiling now is a term that shouldn't be used. It's more like a labyrinth. Women's are having to find their way through and figure this out, and it's still not the easier path, but it is a path that you can get to, and of course we have all kinds of data that shows that. But when we look at these themes down here, we use those kind of themes, and what we do with our research in general is use these kind of themes so that we can design programs for organizations to actually develop the women's leadership in such a way that the objectives of the organization is looking for. We have a program going on in Atlanta right now, the Women's in Cables program. This is WICT is a large organization for all women, in the cable industry, so communication industry, and that we've been doing that work with them for now 20 years, and that program is going on right now for a lot of women in the cable industry. So, this is a very important piece, and it's all about, developing your capabilities, and making sure that you're not suppressing some of the stuff that you bring to the table, that you need to bring. What we have found, some of the research says, is that, sometimes women try to get, and not bring their natural stuff to the table. They want to bring the stuff that they think they should be bringing. And no, you need to understand what it is that you have around collaboration or around thinking differently in how you approach conflict, etc. So, all right. So the center moved over time, it's from not just the individual, because one of the things that we saw was that we were developing individuals, and the individual was actually becoming a better leader. But boy, a lot of times we put that individual back into the organization, and they got swallowed up by that culture. And so, what does that look like? Well, it's, when we took that individual, put him back in the organization, we said, boy, there's some things that we need to do by shifting the focus from just not only the individual, but also the leadership culture of the organization. We also looked at the strategy of the bottom line impact of what is an organization spinning on the individual leadership, and if they do some things around the side, they can actually make the whole better than the sum of all those little pieces. Align the processes and systems to support talent sustainability, and that's when I'm talking about leadership architecture, and I'm talking about how to think about developing your leadership pipeline for an organization. There's been a lot of progress now with organizations around this area. We're doing a lot of work. We just got a large contract with an organization down in Houston, a big energy firm out of South Africa, and they really want to do a lot of work with their leadership culture, not just the individuals, but the culture of the whole place, because they now know that they're going to be growing from just, this subsidiary down here is only about 500 people right now, and they're growing to 3,000 people over the next 3 years. How do you maintain your culture of your organization when you're doing that? It's a really fascinating area. We talk about that for a long time. Part of this is this whole area also of organization networks. So in the culture arena, how are people connecting inside the organization? And how do we need to think about research? And right now you're going to have programs. This is called organization network analysis. And each one of those nodes up there is a person, and they're connected to the different people, because of the surveys that you take, you can get this ONA analysis that you're seeing up here. And it's things like, Kevin over here is knowing and utilizing the network center, and he's connected back over to the green group, and then you have people who are leveraging the network's edge, and you also have people that are bridging silos where collaboration matters. So what that all means is that how do we think about your own effectiveness in a global matrix in such a way that you can make the whole, again, more effective than just the sum of the parts. This research is being really utilized a lot now in big organizations worldwide. So, I was working with a Fortune 10 company, and they had an issue of their business strategy was all revolving around 24/7 research. And what I mean by that is they had an office in EMEA that was working 8 hours and taking a project 8 hours. Then they were handing it off to California, the same project, and then they were handing that project off to APAC. And then it goes back to EMEA. And not just, so they're not like they're just working, this is the same project, and the project gets handed off, and they're trying to reduce their product development cycle time. They're trying to be competitive because that was a key piece of their business strategy. And so how do you think about building leadership in an organization if these three nodes up here were the ones I'm talking about? How can we make these nodes more effective in those handoffs between the different organizations, so that this research does flow better? How can we build virtual teams in the capacity to span boundaries in such a way that it becomes more effective? So this one company we've done a lot of work with, and now they're doing certain things differently so to make that leadership happen. Another company, this is Experian again. I was working with Experian, and the CEO, Don Roberts of Experian, says to me, and he got really excited about this. He pounded on the table, and he says, "Bruce, your job at CCL is to make sure every one of our people understand that the matrix is not the problem. It's not the problem. It's the only way that we're going to actually implement our business strategy, and therefore, our leaders need to embrace it and understand how to work in it." And what he was talking about was this: how do you work in a matrix that requires a lot of handoffs, a lot of different things? How do you collaborate? How do you span boundaries? And how do we think about that in our leadership development so that you are seen as one of those people that can do this? And that's what he was looking for. We designed a program at the very top. These were the top 45 people at the top of Experian that was about ready to go in, our candidates to go into the executive suite, okay, for Experian. And we designed this program with this particular objective in mind, okay? We want and see and understand how the top 45 people, what are their capabilities of doing this? And Don and his team really wanted to be sure that that top 45 understood that next step is different. That next step of going from at the top 45 into the executive suite is quite different, and you have to be able to do this in spades. So we've got a lot of very interesting O&A network analysis research going on right now. I think it's going to be very, very applicable, and it has been so far. It's going to be very applicable for a lot of these global organizations. So, boundary spanning. The other thing we did here is we did a lot of work on research on boundary spanning. So, what does it take for a leader to boundary span? What are the things that keep them from, how do you actually have a bigger mindset about it? And that's another thing that actually was able to do very well. So, the LBB, the last piece of research, again, what I tried to do is throw a lot at you to try to get you aware of a lot of this so that you now go dive deeper and try to understand some of this stuff and realize that it's out there. I didn't realize it was out there when I was a mechanical engineer here at Georgia Tech. You know, I had no idea that there was this whole world of behavioral science. You know, it wasn't in the core curriculum. I don't know. It's me. So, but I have to tell you, it's you know, as you grow in your career, it's just as important as the core curriculum in mechanical engineering. It's just as important, because if you're going to be effective in any organization, these types of things are something that you ought to be looking into and delving into and trying to read. The Leadership Beyond Boundaries stuff is work that we are doing around the world now, that we've tried to democratize a lot of our tools that we use in our development of leaders in such a way that we can actually take it out into and work with tribes, for instance, in Zimbabwe or Ethiopia or Latin America, or we can work with youth in India and do it on a massive scale versus just a kind of a smaller scale. So this is just showing you that we've been doing a lot of work down in South America, but we've done a whole bunch of work in Africa right now. I had the pleasure of going down to Zimbabwe with my two older boys, and the oldest boy got trained up in our LBB work, in our Leadership Beyond Boundary work, and he became a certified trainer. And we went down to work with the Shona tribe down in a little town called Gura in lower Zimbabwe last summer. And it was a pleasure for me to do that because I've never been out of a corporate environment. So I've been working with corporate people and executives, but I've never been in that environment where every day what we were doing, we were there for 10 days, we had 10 young Americans with us, and we were working with the tribe to build a health clinic. But the first 2 hours of every day, or a lot of times it was the last 2 hours, it flipped, but 2 hours a day we were actually doing LBB training with the tribe. And at first it was, we had about 10, 15 people, and boy, then it just seemed to start to grow every day. Everybody, can more people join Mr. Bruce? Mr. Bruce, can more people? So I had to cut it off at 30, but then we had 40, another 30 people around us watching, because we didn't have enough LEB materials to do more than the 30. And I have to say that one of the biggest thrills was after the 10 days. When you work in that kind of environment, you say, well, how much is really setting in? How much are they really getting? And this one gentleman, one tribal leader, came up to me and said, his name was Mr. Magamba. And Mr. Magamba comes up and says, Mr. Bruce. And in the Shona people, when the men say thank you and hi to you, they clap like this. The women clap like this. So he comes up to me and he says, Mr. Bruce, growth mindset, static mindset. We have many people in tribe with static mindset. And I thought, well, okay, he's getting something here. And so how do we change that mindset? And I just kind of tapped him on the shoulder. I said, look, Mr. Montgomery, you need to understand that there are many tribes around the world that have static mindsets, okay? And we face them in corporate America all the time. So our LBB work is very missional driven. It's stuff that we believe in strongly, and it's one of the reasons why we're a nonprofit, that we're doing this kind of work. So it's I just wanted to kind of give you a flavor for that. So what's our ultimate philosophy? Just a couple more slides here. People learning through doing, the experiential piece. There's no doubt that really drive home the learnings of any designed program is that you have to have some strong experientials that challenge you. You need some, I was telling the SAA group, you need some visceral learnings. You need to fail. And actually setting some of that failure to potential failures up in the classroom versus the real life can actually help you have that visceral learning. We also believe that self-awareness is a foundation. If you don't really understand yourself, there's too many of us are walking around today with, we think we understand how the world sees us, but until you really get that kind of feedback about how the world sees you, there's going to be gaps, and there's gaps in all of our perceptions, I guarantee it. Sometimes, you're much harder on yourself than on your people. Your people are saying, boy, you're great, and you're hard on yourself. Sometimes it's just the opposite. Sometimes it's just 2 items or 2 areas where you're getting the feedback on, and sometimes it's 5 areas. But this self-awareness is absolutely foundational, not only about yourself and what you need to develop, but then understanding other people. Understanding that that they have also, they're coming from different places, et cetera. And so my interactions, my perceptions, the way that I look at the world through my lens may not be the same as yours. So how do we get to common ground? And just understanding some of these concepts will allow you to have a better interpersonal relationship and get back to the driver piece. And this last piece is assessment, challenge, and support. I want to talk about that in a little bit more detail. So fundamental to our philosophy of learning and development is this area of assessment. The assessment piece is to help to bring the self-awareness. It's really hardcore data that it's going to be pretty hard for you to sit there and to take in and or argue with, etc. The challenge piece is how I just talked about it. It's a developmental experience. It could be an action learning project like I talked about with Experian. Sometimes we have team coaches that follow the action learning projects around. My son is at an MBA program at Colorado State University, and it's a program that they allow 25 people in a year or so. Half of them are international, half of them are U.S.-based, U.S. people, Americans. I'll spit it out. And so in that 25, what they do is they actually create a program where they are going to take it over to an emerging country and implement it, and try to make that business model work. And they have a team coach. I thought this is the first time I've heard of a business school doing this. They have a team coach for their team that comes out of the behavioral science. And there's a lot of conflict that goes on, as you can imagine. And so at the end of the day, this team coach is teaching them a lot of that interpersonal stuff on the derailers. They're getting the feedback one-on-one from that team coach. So it's an interesting concept about how they're doing an action learning project. Companies like Patagonia and REI and Whole Foods are sponsoring a lot of these programs, these projects that they're going to do next summer, a year from now. But I've never seen that before. So this, and that's the support piece. Okay. So the challenge is that they're going to go over and do this work in an emerging country and set up a business model and try to make that work. The support piece is that team coach is there as well as the professors themselves. So it's assessment, challenge, support. It's really necessary to actually start to have behavior change. And if you don't have all 3, I would submit to you that you're not going to have the impact in any kind of a program like you could have. So hang with me one more slide. Okay, so my lessons of experience. So what have I noticed young people coming into the workplace and working with them? What are the ones that really make it and are very clear from the get-go that they are going to start to be a contributor and someone that I want to invest in our organization? This first one is be a lifelong learner. And I mean that from all sides. I see too many times people come in, whether they're 25 or whether they're 35, and sit there and act like they know it all already. And they're not asking, they're not listening, they're not asking questions. They're coming in with the attitude they have the answer. And and some of these are going to be intertwined. That's a little bit about ego. That's a little about humility, not having humility. But it's also just this thirst for learning, and be a lifelong learner. It's we've done this 3 times in the history of CCL. We've actually had 3 leadership at the peaks where we invited nothing but 4-star generals and CEOs. Okay, so the very first one we did, we had 8 4-star generals and admirals, and we had 4 CEOs of Fortune 200 companies, okay, in this course. And when I went around and asked the individuals in the course, why are you here? Why did you come to this? I mean, you're at the pinnacle of your career. I mean, you can't do any more than 4 stars here, and CEO already, so why are you here? And there's different answers, but there was one common answer for every one of the 12. And every one of the 12 is you can't ever quit learning. Okay? And I've heard a lot of good things about CCL. Just the concept of being in the room with 7 other 4-stars and 4 CEOs. I want to learn more from them than you guys. And he says, yeah, you probably will. Okay? But it's all about don't quit learning, okay? It's very critical. And if you come across as wanting to learn, if you come across as asking questions and really wanting to, I just received a beautiful email today from a lady that she's come up through the ranks, and we just made her faculty because she went out and she really did a lot of stuff. And she's been in that role for about 6 months, and she goes, I am having so much fun because I'm learning so much. And she's absolutely going to be a great faculty person. But I know that right now, just from the way that she talked about what's happened in the last 6 months, she's a lifelong learner. She really wants to get in there and do this. Become totally self-aware. This is the piece that is you're going to have access to assessments. You'll be able to make sure you take them. Go out there and find some. There's really interesting small things that you can do to understand how do you personally approach change, for instance. Everybody's different. Some people approach change in small steps. Some people really like to take the big step and get into it. And so there's this whole notion of how do we each, what is our preference of actually approaching change? And so in the bottom line here is that if in fact you're not self-aware, then you're going to be missing gaps and you're not going to know exactly sure what you should be working on. Go out there and learn. In the SAA group, they asked me the question, what have I been reading lately? What I've been reading lately a lot is neuroscience, and how neuroscience is really confirming all the behavioral science, okay, that we've been doing for the last 20 or 30 years. And what I mean by that is we're seeing why meditation works and why in fact your neurons do start to rearrange themselves. The neuroplasticity that is happening when you're having assessment, challenge, and support is actually going on, and so change can happen. And so there's some very interesting, research. We're doing some research with Notre Dame around this, and it's all coming out, and it's just fascinating stuff. Be fascinated in it. That's where you're going to become a lifelong learner and applying it to yourself and becoming totally self-aware. Develop a taste of humility. Please do this. There is no faster way of derailing yourself than if this is not something you do. If you really think about the causal loops of some of those things back there on the derailment chart, a lot of it's about ego, a lot of it's about humility. If in fact you've got too big an ego, and if in fact you don't bring humility to the room, you're going to be exhibiting a lot of those derailment factors. And so at the end of the day, it's you got to have this. And I think this is one of the areas that potentially derails people faster and quicker than anything, because you don't collaborate very well. You think that you know the answers. So develop a sense of humility, definitely. And then the last one is always be grateful. My grandmother, last few years, she was a wonderful person and taught me a whole bunch my whole life. And one of the things that she always said to me is that, hey, it's about being grateful for what you're being given. And the last few years of her life, she was in a bed, stuck, and I would call her up and say, Grandma, how are you doing? I'm grateful. First thing out of her mouth, every time. If you say that enough, it's like rearranging those neurons that we just talked about in neuroscience, okay? If you understand, so we've done research on what makes, some of the research we did, we found out that as you go up in the organization, you become happier. We can't tell from the research that we've done, but my hypothesis is if you're the happier and more grateful person, you're going to rise up in the organization. And that's why, so what's really the cause and effect here is that question. But to me, if you show gratefulness and this, bless you, If you show gratefulness, if you actually exhibit it, it's seen by your teammates. It's seen by the people in that network analysis that I showed you. It is seen by your peers, your boss, your subordinates. One of the things that we know for sure in all the research is that if in fact you work with your team in a way that gives them support, then you're going to have a stronger team, and being grateful for their work is something that's really important as well. So be grateful. It's just a good way to go through life, as well as helping your career along as well. I'll leave you with one last story, just to kind of give you a glimpse of what this all looks like coming together. So I'm working with, and I'm allowed to use his name because he told me I could, the CEO of Vought Aircraft. Okay, and this is prior to they got kind of dismantled, but he was brought in by Carlyle Group to turn it around. He gives us a call one day and he says, Bruce, I need help. We have no leadership pipeline in this organization whatsoever. We have no leadership development going on. I've got a very weak leadership team, and I need help. So, and he says, I went to CCL back in the late 70s. It turned my whole career around, turned my life around, and so we got into the conversation about Vought and the team and what he was looking for, and then I went back to that statement. I said, Elmer, that was a pretty powerful statement you made. You talked about, this changed your life around. So can you elaborate? I'm just curious. And he said, well, first of all, I went through LAB, Leadership at the Peak, with an organization called FMC. It was bought out by United Defense. But when he was with FMC, I was going through LAP, and what I realized is that those derailment factors, and once I got my 360 instrument, I realized I wasn't here because they were trying to develop me. I was there because they were trying to save me. I had a number of things that I needed to work on, and I took it to heart. And I made sure that I said, I'm going to pay attention to this. I did the coaching afterwards, so the support piece. And so you got the assessments, you got the support. He says, you guys challenged me in spades during the process. He says, I would not be CEO today if it wasn't for LAP. Excuse me. I would not be CEO today if it wasn't for LAP. There's no doubt in my mind. I probably would have derailed. And after I went in United Defense, my career took off, and I started going up, and then the headhunter found me, and now I'm CEO of Vought. And so that's a great story. And he says, well, there's more to it, Bruce. He says, in Leadership at the Peak, we do a lot of research around health. What is the health of these executives coming through, and then matching it up with their own leadership profiles and how effective they are. And this, I'm going to put this in the category of a BFO, is blinding flash of the obvious. The more healthy you are, the better leader you are. Okay? And so it's a BFO you can take to the bank, but his bottom line is that's true. And he says, when I came through LAP, I smoked. I wasn't in very good shape at all, and so I took that to heart. And I'm a triathlete now. I said, triathlete? I said, are you kidding me? And he says, no. He says, I compete in triathlon. So I thought, well, that's a great story. He says, well, that's not all, Bruce. If you want to hear more, I said, sure. He says, that coaching worked for me, and my marriage was on the rocks. And so I ended up going to my wife and saying, would you go to marriage counseling with me? And I had to pick her up off the floor and kind of prop her up, and she says, certainly. And he says, I've been married 40 years, and I don't think without LAP I would still be married. And I said, this is the best story I've ever heard coming from one of our ex-participants now, okay? And it shows you change can happen. It's all here. You can make behavior changes, you can work on things, and you can do things. So now he's got his health, he's got his family life and his career, and he says, one more thing, Bruce. I said, come on, Elmer, you're not pulling my leg. He says, no. He says, I'm a golfer. And during this whole process of, I was getting more self-centered, more, kind of focused on who I am, my family life coming in, my golf course scores kept coming down, and then I hit my first hole-in-one, and without LAP, I never would have hit it. So I thought, okay, that's by far the best story I've ever heard. So, but my point to you all is, that I hope that you're leaving here with is, that you are in a place that you're starting a journey. If you already started it, okay, but it's going to continue right now. So get your mind around the journey and what it needs to be for you. Get your mind around what are those steps that I'm going to take around becoming more self-aware. How do I understand, what good leadership looks like, and what does collaboration and how do I work with that better, et cetera. So I hope that I've spurred in you a little bit of inclination to go out there and delve, because I know as a technical institution sometimes we don't actually get into that very much at times. So I would hope that you do that. Okay? So thank you. Thank you very much. So this is Colorado. This is our campus in Colorado. My first job was to get the building built, so back in 1991. So that was being the engineer and actually doing some building in the past. So questions?
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Hey Bruce, thank you for coming and speaking with us today. Georgia Tech actually has a fledgling leadership coaching program that started this semester. So I was kind of curious on your thoughts on what's really the significant difference between coaching relationships and mentoring relationships?
Good. It's a great question. Coaching, really, you are, I would say, trained more to be able to get into a deeper conversation around the issues that you might be wrestling with, okay? And usually it's very, very focused. Usually we're focusing on 2 or 3 things that are coming out of that assessment process and really working on those 2 or 3 things. Where the mentorship is that support piece. It is definitely advice. It's definitely the kind of things that you're looking for in support, but not necessarily with the depth of the laser focus of what you're trying to do in a coaching session. We have about 600 coaches worldwide now. We can deliver our coaching in 17 different languages. And we have a very stringent coaching development process to be able to get certified to be one of our coaches. We go in and help organizations set up mentorship programs inside their organization that are much lighter, is what I would say, okay? I mean, it's paying attention to certain things, et cetera. How do you develop a mentor inside of an organization that's effective is the purpose of that, but it's not into the kind of a laser-focused depth that we're doing in our coaching. Does that make sense? Yeah. Yes.
Is this on? I just want to say first, thank you so much for coming to speak with us. I'm also going to graduate in May with a mechanical engineering degree. I'm looking to pursue my PE license. So my question for you is, how did you develop your leadership skills during the first part of your career, which was so technically focused?
Yeah, I didn't. So the question was, how did I develop it? And I really didn't. I mean, so at 30. 31, I guess, I had a small group underneath me in the planning and development, so I was, like I said, we were doing a lot of merger acquisition work, that type of thing. It was trial by fire. And, and Cooper at the time did not do any leadership development for us, so it was, and I didn't even pay attention to what I should be paying attention to. Hopefully I'm raising some of that stuff up for you now, because I wasn't doing it. And then at 34, I had a business unit underneath me, about a $500 million business unit at British Petroleum. And geez, I was out of my comfort zone there. It was a small business unit for the oil business. It was maybe 300 people. But at 34, 35, now you got 200 people, 300 people underneath you, and you got terminals all over on all coasts. In trying to do that, boy, that was trial by fire. And again, I wasn't paying attention. I wasn't even reading what I should have been reading. It wasn't really till I got to CCL, and I'd sent some people off to CCL, and they came back raving about it. So, I said, well, maybe and when after the heart attack, I said, well, maybe I want to work there. And then I found out that they had a small office in Colorado Springs, and they were thinking about building a campus there. I was all over that, Now, so was 499 other people, and so I was lucky enough again to get through the maze and get the job. But I really wasn't paying attention, and so again, that's why I'm trying to. I wanted to put enough out there that you all see, boy, there's a lot of stuff here, and it's fascinating stuff. It really is. And so, I hope that you do better than I do. Okay?
Bruce, you got a question?
Yes.
Hello, thanks for your talk.
Yeah.
I had a question leading off your women's leadership section. So some studies have come out, case studies, where they show there's a negative correlation between women's success and their likability. I think there was one out of Harvard, simple case study, just changed up the name between male and female, and male came off as, oh, I'd like to work for him, real go-getter, and the female came off as too aggressive, etc., and yet it was the exact same case study.
Yeah.
Have you personally witnessed this phenomenon?
Oh, yeah.
If so, what are your thoughts?
Thoughts is that you remember one slide I had back there talking about, pay attention to who you are. And I think that sometimes what happens in that kind of situation that you're talking about is that the female is trying to be something they really aren't. So there's this whole area of authenticity, okay? I didn't touch on that at all. So there's a lot of research around, the best leaders come across as authentic. And so if in fact you're out there not really showing that, or you're being aggressive because you think that you need to be aggressive, and versus what are the skills that you need to bring to the table right now to actually address this challenge that you're facing or the work that you're doing, and sometimes we just see, our research says the same thing. Sometimes women get in a mode saying, I need to be like this to succeed, and we're saying don't do that. Let's take a step back. Now, the whole issue of work-life balance and likability, etc. Some of that can come out just by the individual themselves. Just like a guy can be a great boss and a guy can be a bad boss, so can women. Okay, but what I'm talking about as a whole, though, we sometimes we see women trying to be what they don't need to be doing. They need to be authentic in who they are and bring those skills that you have to the table. I don't know if that answers your question or not. Yeah, thanks. Yes.
Thank you so much for coming to speak to us. I think you've given us all a whole lot to think about. You kind of went over how you made your transition from engineering to business to nonprofit, but I was curious kind of why you did it, and you sort of explained between mergers and acquisitions to nonprofit, but that's such a significant leap from engineering to business, where your corporate ladder looks so different. I was curious what prompted you to do that.
The industry. So what happened was, if you go back in time and you see what was happening in the late 70s and early 80s, the industry that I was particularly in the cogen, the power plants and stuff, was just turning down rapidly. And so I was privileged enough to be in a small group that was working with the planning and development groups of organizations like Shell and Amoco, and they were saying, hey, things are going to turn down, and we're not going to build that many plants during the 80s. They didn't think we had overcapacity. The power generation, we're getting more efficient and effective, and so we don't need as many power plants, and all that came true. And so what I did in '79 was go get my MBA because of what I was hearing. So and that just gave me the flexibility to go do other things when the downturn did hit, and it did. The power group at Brown and Root, now KBR, Kellogg Brown and Root, went from about 3,000 people down to 500 within 3 years. Okay, and luckily I was prepared to leave before that all happened. So good question, though. It's, so pay attention to your industry, pay attention to your desire. I got into the business school, and boy, I found all kinds of things that I liked, that I didn't know I liked. And that was just interesting. The finance area was really something I really was drawn to. The whole strategy arena I was really drawn to that. So it was just a, good, it was a good experience in learning. so yeah, great question.
One last question.
Yeah.
Actually, that question prompted me to ask you something publicly versus what I was going to ask you privately later, and that was the comment about you moving from engineering to business to nonprofit. And other than historical reasons, why is Center for Creative Leadership a nonprofit versus a, social business? Because, some people don't even know, given the cost, given your brand and the quality, the prices you charge are much higher than a lot of your competitors. So what's this nonprofit business?
Yeah, great. It's great question, Harry. The founder, Smith, he wanted us to stay, he wanted us to, as a nonprofit, and wanted to stay nonprofit because he wanted us to focus on that mission that you saw. And he felt like that if we got into just to be more of a typical consulting firm, that we would lose focus of that. So it was one of the things that he was very strong about, and one of the legacy quotes is, you guys got to stay nonprofit. And because he wanted that research and that missional bent to be front and center, and not making the bottom line, and not making. So yeah, we charge a lot. We've got a very expensive business model, and it's a tough business model in some ways because it is so expensive around the research side that our competitors don't do. And then we go out and we give away our IP. And we do stuff like that, and so that kind of hurts our business model too. So it's a tough. We try to manage to a 2 or 3% bottom line, but then all of a sudden we have a year like this year, and the Americas is scrambling because one of the things I did 5 years ago was really focus on the government business more. The good news is we grew it from 2 to 9 million. The bad news is we had 9 million when we were shut down. So, so now we're scrambling because of the shutdown. Now it's all coming back now, but it's a short-term thing. But it's really about the desire. And on our board is Peter Richardson, the grandson, and he's there to make sure that this stays a nonprofit. So great question, though. Does that answer it? Yeah.
Thank you so much for coming, Bruce.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, everybody.